The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Bill Wolf. I am here, let's see, it's on February 8th, so I hope you all are warming up. Just a few notes. uh, we are starting to get ready for Past Summit 2018, so we're going to have some surveys here. Andy's going to put that up on his slide deck. I think the recordings for Summit 2017 were released recently. So if you were able to attend Summit and you want to get those recordings, you can get them through pass.org, I believe. And we are here, and we're going to listen to Mr. Andy Leonard here talk about SSIS, or DevOps for SSIS. Andy is the co-founder and chief data engineer at Enterprise Data and Analytics. Wow, I've known Andy for quite a few years now, and SSIS trainer. He's books and SSIS and everything. He's got a resume a mile long, about as long as his beard. So I'm going to go ahead and just hand this right over to Andy, and we'll let him begin. And remember, if you want to have a chance at a $100 gift card, stick around to the end, and Andy will help pick a winner.
Thank you so much, Bill, for that warm introduction. For those of you who don't know Bill Wolf, he's one of my favorite people in the community. Certainly my favorite person for the longest time here. And let's see if I do a show my screen. Let me get the right monitor going here. There we go. There's a link to that past program content survey. And I put that up at the beginning here. It's available until the 14th of February, Valentine's Day. You can supply some feedback to the PASS organization, and they're going to use that feedback in shaping the program content for the PASS Summit 2018. So I invite you to participate in that. Your feedback's always welcome, and you never know. You may have the killer idea that someone sees in the survey response and goes, I want some of that. That's a great idea. Let's do that. So you just never know. But thank you, Bill, again, for that warm introduction. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, brother. Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit and then come back to this slide. The title of this is DevOps for SSIS. And definitely want to discuss DevOps and what that looks like for SSIS. I'm going to be sharing some from a book. We popped over to the next slide. That came out right at the end of 2017. I think it may have been the last day of 2017. Data Integration Lifecycle Management with SSIS. It's subtitled A Short Introduction by Example. And I'm going to let y'all in on a little secret. I wrote most of this book in about a week. We had just finished writing the BIML book, which was the book that was released around Halloween of last year. And I guess I kind of needed like a shift gears project, something to kind of get out of the BIML thinking for a while. Not that BIML isn't awesome, it is, but anytime you write a book about something, it's demanding, and you have to just think about it a lot. And I don't care how much you love something, and I do love BIML. After having to think about it, when it becomes a job, it's not fun. So, and also I co-led that team along with Scott Curry, the person who invented BIML. So I was at a client site. I was talking to Bill a little before we started here. I like getting up really early normally, and I was up early before the workday started. I think we were actually on site something like 8:30 to 4, which is a half day to an entrepreneur. So I'd get up and write for a couple hours in the morning. I'd write a couple hours in the evening. Anyway, that's what I do. You can read the screen if you'd like for the rest of the details. Bill, I'm hoping people are able to see my screen. Can you confirm?
I can confirm I can see it. So if I can see it, I would assume they can. If you guys,
okay.
If anybody can't, they'll chime in and I'll let you know.
Okay, great. Very cool. All right, so let's talk some then about what we're going to talk about today. We're going to walk through these 3 demos. We're going to look at some configuration of an SSIS project in the SSIS catalog. We're going to look at surfacing SSIS catalog configurations, which is metadata. And we're also going to talk about execution management and monitoring. And while an hour is not enough time to really dive in deeply into everything that you have to do DevOps, we can go over at maybe say a 50,000 foot level what this means. So DevOps is really a contraction of two words, development and operations. And what it means essentially is that when you're developing software, you build it in such a way that it supports easier, better, cleaner, faster troubleshooting. It facilitates operations job. And on the operations side, their job is not just to take whatever we develop as developers. I am a developer, by the way. It's not just their job to take whatever we develop and just make do with it, although that ends up happening quite often. Their job is to provide us feedback about things like how easy is it to, say, script this object. Sorry, I've got another computer here flashing at me. Something shiny for the ADHD guy. They need to know things like how, when something breaks, where are the messages being logged? If it's time to rebuild a server, how easy is it to restore the code, essentially? In this case, we're talking about SSIS. How easy is it to redeploy the SSIS? Is the process documented? Does it make sense? Is it consistent in an enterprise? And that can really be key when things go bad and it's time to, say, rebuild a server. How quickly can you get back up? So there's a lot of tools that are generic. Probably the most generic tool for DevOps in the Microsoft stack is PowerShell, because you can create these repeatable scripts that will allow you to do things, including redeploy SSIS packages. So there's a lot of things out there that tools like that you can use. Now, having mentioned PowerShell, that's about it. I'm not going to talk about PowerShell anymore in this presentation. But I have written some about PowerShell with SSIS, more specifically about Azure Data Factory version 2 integration runtime, which some people refer to as SSIS in the cloud. And it is SSIS in the cloud. You can deploy packages out there to a catalog, you can execute them, connect to them. And I'm just going to talk more about these three topics. I'm kind of going to drop here into the middle of DevOps and talk about what does this look like, what are some of the tools that are available. So with that being said, catalog project configuration looks like this in SQL Server Management Studio or SSMS. There is a node called the Integration Services Catalogs node. Notice the S on the end of catalogs. I'm told that's there because at one point they were considering allowing you to create multiple catalogs. They decided to limit that to just one. It's named SSIS DB, and that's also the name of the database, really where all of these objects live. So the SSIS DB database contains a lot of SQL CLR, Common Language Runtime, which is .NET that's built right into to SQL Server, or exposed to SQL Server. And sorry, I got one more thing to turn off over here. Sorry, that's the flashing over the side of my face. Okay, that's done. The reason for that is a lot of the things that happen with executing packages occurs in .NET. So there are stored procedures that are written in .NET that are executed from SQL Server, and that causes things to happen under the hood. Everything that you see surfaced in this screenshot that I've got of the Integration Services Catalog, SSIS DB, represents the 4 tiers that are available. They're all stored inside of tables in a schema called internal. There's another schema in the SSIS database, SSIS DB, called catalog. Sorry, there's one called custom that I put in there. We'll talk about that at the end. And catalog contains some tables, but mostly views. There's a lot of views in there that are in the catalog schema. And you can think about that as a database programmer's interface, sort of like a database equivalent of an application programmer's interface or an API. This DPI in the catalog schema exposes or surfaces a lot of the metadata and configurations information that, pardon me, hang on just a second, that that most people would need if you were querying directly against the SSIS DB database. It's also used by these objects here in the node, not completely, but a lot of them. Let's see what else. There's other configuration stuff. There's things like environments. So an environment is a collection of variables. They're called environment variables, which are not to be confused with environment variables from the OS. I refer to them usually as catalog environments and catalog environments variables to kind of make a discernment there. But it's a collection of variables. The variables have a data type, optional description. They can be sensitive or not sensitive, and they have a value. They have to have a name, a data type, and a value. That's just part of it. And you can use the configurations options for either a project or a package, although it's kind of hard to see when you're configuring a package. If you dig into the metadata in SSIS DB's database, then you will see that, yep, there are differences between configurations. There's actually 5 categories out of the box of object types that you can configure. 2 of them are project and package. But from the surface, and I like this about the surface, it's just there. When you come into the configure a sample project, and this DILM sample is the sample project I used in the book that I've been talking about. So that's basically what it looks like inside of SSMS. I have some alternatives that I've built for this, and I can talk about some of them in this meeting. It's okay that I can't talk about all of them, but I will talk about the ones that are free and or open source, and they're all available at a website called DILM, Data Integration Lifecycle Management Suite, dilmsuite.com. And you can go there and download these. Again, a lot of these are free. Most, in fact, are free. Some are open source in addition to being free. This particular one, Catalog Browser, is something that I built just kind of goofing around. I was like, I'd really like to be able to see all this without having to open all these dialogues. It would sure be nice to take a look at it. And I'll show you actually a newer version than this. And this version, 0.5.6, which is in beta. It's still in beta. I'll show you 0.5.7, which surfaces a little bit more, and you can get a bit of a feel for what's coming in an upcoming release. But it's a unified surface. Everything is there in the tree. You can see like the project parameters right there under the node called project parameters in the screenshot. And one neat thing, I was goofing around writing. I was actually writing a series about blog posts. It's actually taken me a couple months. Sorry, but they all popped up. I think about 3 Sundays ago or something. But you can see this SQL Server instance. That's actually in the cloud. So I'm touching Azure Data Factory version 2, the integration runtime, and this will work with that. And again, it's pretty free. It's free. And I think it's fairly functional, but I'll let you be the judge of it. If since it's free, if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. So the last thing we're going to be demoing today, as we get into the demos next shortly, is a few other things that from the DILM suite. So we're going to look at the SSIS Framework Community Edition. That one's free and open source. We're going to look at surfacing what we call an SSIS application. That's something I made up. An SSIS application is a collection of packages that run in a specific order. That's what the framework does, is it allows you to call, one stored proc and pass it an application name, and it'll run these 300 packages for you in this order. And you can configure things like, is the package restartable? Is the project restartable, the application restartable? You can't do that in this version, but you can do things like, is the application package fault tolerant? So does the package failure equate to an application failure? And that's kind of a neat piece of functionality to have in a free framework, I think. Framework browser allows you to visualize these. You can see a version of it there on the screen in the screenshot. And I'm also going to show you catalog reports, which is that it's a lot like the catalog, the SSIS catalog reports that are built into SQL Server Management Studio. The difference is the reports that are built into Management Studio are hard-coded in there. There's some people in the enterprise, especially when you get into larger enterprises, that may have a need to see how things are running in production. Maybe once the data warehouse load completes, there's some regulatory reports, and the CFO and her office, they want to get right on that and get that cranked out. But you know, she's not SQL Server savvy, so you'd be doing her a disservice if you put Management Studio on her desktop and gave her even, you know, view-only rights for SSIS Log Reader, which is available in 2016. Plus, if you're doing this in 2012 or 2014, you have to make her a member of the SSIS admin role, and that's just not good as a practice of the principle of least privilege. So this is a read-only collection of reports. You download them. The T-SQL is stored inside of the reports themselves. I usually break these out into stored procs when I deploy them, but it's all there. You can edit it. It's saved as text, and you can pull those out, run them in SSMS, play with them, you know, bend, fold, mutilate, redeploy. Do what you'd like with it. It's yours. And I built them intentionally to mimic those reports, at least the 4 I find most useful, built into SSMS. So with that said, I want to jump right into some demos, if that's okay. I want to look first and see if there are any questions.
There are two questions.
Okay, what do we got?
The first one is, could you repeat the URL for your site?
My site, yeah.
The site you were talking about, yeah.
Yes, I can. In fact, I'll do that when I get over here. What's the second question?
Second question is, what would you recommend as source control process for SSIS projects?
Any source control that you use is good. So you need something that's got a plug-in for Visual Studio, or that probably integrates with Windows Explorer. I've used a bunch of different ones. Certainly TFS, Git. I'm trying to remember the other one, the one that does the tortoise shell, SVN, I think it's called. Yep. I've used those, and so yeah, those are all good. It's kind of like, you know, when people ask me which source control is best, I say the one you use. So use one, please. Yeah. So I've got a chapter early in the book that talks about that and walks through setting up Visual Studio. VisualStudio.com, TFS, Team Foundation Server, online. It's in the cloud. It's free. If you go to VisualStudio.com and create an account, if you don't have a live account already, go there, create it. This is what's beautiful about this. It's free for you and up to 4 other people. After that, you can start paying folks. But really, 5 people can use this for free. There's no excuse, and it's built into the client. Team Explorer is actually built into the later versions of Visual Studio. So I want to say it's in, I know for a fact it's in 2015 and 2017. It may be in 2013, or you may have to download a client. It's not hard to find, and it's very easy to configure. I'll keep threatening to release that chapter as a blog post at andyleonard.com, Andy Leonard. There's actually an andyleonard.com, and the guy is a sysadmin. He's like a Unix sysadmin or something out in Seattle. And he got the domain before I did. Darn it. But andyleonard.blog is where I blog, and I did put a chapter out there that's kind of the beginning of why I started writing the DILM suite. And I started writing this in August of 2015. So there's your website, DILM, Data Integration Lifecycle Management is DILM, and DILMsuite.com. And you can see catalog reports. We're going to look at that. We're not going to do the catalog dashboard, but that's very basic. But it'll kind of, all of this stuff is really meant to get your feet wet, get you introduced to them. So let's talk some first about, I got to look at my slides again. What did I talk about first? This is, I was talking to Bill about being old. And here we go. So that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to scroll down. I talked about project configuration. Okay, let's look at SSMS. So I'm hoping you're able to see my screen okay. I'll turn on Zoom it so that I can do some zooming here. This is the SSMS Object Explorer, and I hope that's big enough everyone can see it. I've got a catalog here. I can right-click, and if you don't have a catalog created, this will be enabled. You can create a catalog. You have to supply a strong password, which is always a good idea. Don't goof around. And you can do a lot with it. Notice in 2016, I believe it was, you could do always on. In 2017, I think the SSIS DB database became a first-class citizen of always on. But this is the note. It's 4 layers here. There's the catalog, which has to be named SSIS DB. Like Highlander, there can be only one. There's these folders that we see here, named Framework, Test, and Test folder. And that's the second level. So we have catalog, folders. We have a virtual projects folder and a virtual environments folder. On level 3, there's 2 types of objects, projects and environments, catalog environments. And then on level 4, there's only packages by itself. And so, again, this is the example that I wrote about in the book. You build this project. You can go download this project. I think I've got it out there somewhere on github.com/aleonard763. And if you're good with numbers and math, you know I'm turning 55 this year. Anyway, so this is what it looks like in it. If I want to execute this SSIS package in the catalog, and by the way, I got it here by deploying it. I'm not going to show you how to deploy SSIS packages. I've written about it a bunch. But if we want to execute it, we just right-click and click Execute. And the Execute package window shows up. It's giving me a bit of a warning here. It says, hey, you've configured a catalog environment variable. I've done it over here on Catalog Manage, Connection Managers, but no environment has been configured. In fact, if I click that, it'll show it to me in this nice little dialog. It's a great message because all I need to do to solve it is go down here and check this box and select one. Exactly what it tells me to do right here. How often do you see that? The error message tells you exactly how to fix it. Not often enough is the answer. When I click that environment, note that I've got an environment variable poorly named here. It's just called connection string. But the fact that that text is decorated with an underline tells me, hey, you've configured that to use a reference mapping. Big word. We'll come back to it in just a minute. When I click OK, the SSIS package executes, and I get prompted, do you want to see the overview report? I'm going to click yes, just so we can jump right into the overview report, and we'll see, with any luck, this will not only run but succeed. And it did. The overview report's nice. It gives us a breakdown of all of the executables, the executable paths, rather, inside of the SSIS package. Is a very simple package. It's got a script task called SCR log values. It's got an execute SQL task called SQL get table count. I'll bet you'll never guess what that's doing. No, in fact, you will guess what this is doing because this is part of the talk. Using a naming convention is not only a best practice, but it's a really good idea for DevOps. Because think about it. At 2:30 a.m., the package is going to run, and one day, maybe, it's going to fail. And somebody may go in an operations center, they may go to this report right here inside of SSMS. Somebody who is technically savvy enough to look at this report, and they're going to see this this very report. Pardon me. And they may see that something failed in here. Where it says succeeded, we may see failed. They can drill into this report and just look at the messages that were generated by that executable. We just went to a new report called messages. We left an overview. And here's all of the messages that happened in that one source, SQL get table count. These are all of the things that were generated. Now, these actually aren't all of the things that were generated. By default, the SSIS catalog logs at a basic level. We could have changed that in that execute box before we clicked OK, but we didn't. We ran with the normal settings, and I kind of like doing that because the more we log, the more impact we have on performance. There's a lot of information in here. You can actually create messages and inject them into this log. I'll show you how to do that. In fact, we do in this the script log values. I'm going to go to the messages report, and it's going to show us all of the messages now. And if we look in here, we'll see that there is a message right here that tells me the table count is 0. I know why there's a table count of 0. I just created this instance of a database. It's called TestDB, and it ran out. I didn't put any tables in it, and it went out there and counted 0 tables. This message is actually raised from inside of SSIS and sent into my log. I do a lot of this. I use a script task to do it. There's a namespace in the code, whatever language you use, C# or VB. It's DTS.events. And then there's a bunch of fire message types. Like this one was raised by a fire information. And fire information, I can construct a message in a string variable, and I can build it out of other variable values that are in my SSIS package. And this is really useful when I'm doing things in SSIS like looping. I may make it through 50 things in the loop, and then 51 fails. Well, how am I going to troubleshoot that? It'd be really nice if I was logging these messages, and by the way, they're listed in last to first, descending order, time-wise. So if one of these fails, if I got a message out here that tells me, hey, you were looking at this object or this item in a list or this file name, you were trying to load this, that's extremely helpful if I've got a big list of them. So using that type of instrumentation in your ETL or in your data integration process, I think is key, and it's a huge part of DevOps. So we want to be able to give that operator who's looking at this at 2:30 a.m., or maybe that's not 2:30 a.m., maybe it's 2:30 p.m. in their time zone, and they're watching this while we get a good nap. They can see this message, and they know when they call you, they've got something intelligent to tell you. Hey, it loaded, 50 of the files, but it got to number 51 and blew up, and the name of the file is da-da-da-da, and it's in an email, and I'm so sorry to wake you up. Go fix this and then go back to sleep as soon as possible. This is a big part of DevOps, is this messaging, and SSIS has a really good messaging engine, and if you're using the SSIS catalog, it's actually better in here than it is if you run from the command line, or say from the file system or the MSDB database. They rebuilt the execution engine in 2012, and it's called IS Server Exec. So you can still call, in fact, the only way that I know of to call IS Server Exec is from DT Exec, which is called on the command line whenever you run an SSIS package outside of the debugger. And if you run it from inside of the catalog, it'll call IS Server Exec, and that process kind of spins off the logging into an asynchronous process, which makes it faster. So have you ever had to write the same functionality twice? I have, and it's actually kind of cool when you do that. It's even cooler when it's part of your development cycle. We call it refactoring. You usually come up with better ways to do it. But how do we configure this project? Well, I can create this environment that I talked about. This one's named ENV Connection, and I'm going to make this a little bigger before I zoom in. I'll zoom in just a minute. Hold your horses. There's that connection string and catalog environment variable that I created. It's part of this collection, this environment called ENV Connection 1. And the way I hook it into this project is I go to the project, right-click and configure, and then inside the project, I first create a reference. This creates a connection between the project and the environment, okay? That's step one. After I've done this, I can look at my parameters. And by the way, connection manager properties are stored in SSIS DB as parameters. They get their own special tab over here, but they're stored as parameters. Then I can click this override button, and that opens up a set parameter value. Now, if you do this and you do not have a reference configured first, the use environment variables down here that I've got selected will not be enabled because you have no references. But note that the value that this was stored, the default value for this package where it was built, and it was built on a different VM, my VM demo, which is my 2016 VM. This is VM SQL 17, which is my 2017. That value stays with the package. It's actually deployed with it. And if I want, I could check this box and go back to it. Or I could highlight this and get this name, and I could click edit value here and paste it in here, and I could name this something else. I could say, you know, go to this particular server is VM SQL 17. If I just put a dot there, / demo, it'll go to the demo instance, and this will work. This becomes an override at this point, what's called a literal in catalog parlance. So lots of things, but there's 3 sources of values for any parameter in the SSIS catalog. I'm going to put this one back to use environment variable. I'm just going to cancel to make double sure. That text decoration tells me it's overridden by a reference mapping. Remember, we hooked the project to the project to the environment, and then when we do this piece here, the piece I was just doing in the set parameter value, we're actually dropping down 1 level on both sides. We're setting the parameter value in the project to an environment variable value. So if you kind of look at this in your mind, it's like a 5-step, it's like a 5-part thing going on here with this referencing. It's complicated. It takes some time to get your head around it. But once you do, you'll see how elegant a solution this is. And I find it to be, it has several advantages and a couple disadvantages when compared to SSIS running in the file system or MSDB and using package configurations. So that's really all I wanted to talk about with configurations. Mr. Wolf, do we have any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. I explained that well. No, I'm sure I didn't. Okay. This is being recorded, so you can watch the recording later and back it up. So if I said something crazy dumb or worse. All right. So again, as you can see, a lot of opening up of windows here, right? So there's that window, and then there's right click and configure. There's a lot going on in here. Where I'm doing is, oh, by the way, I should have showed you this. I've got a couple of values in here, this is a project parameter, and I've overridden it. So that's what it looks like when you override it. That is a literal in catalog parlance, and it's in bold text decoration. I also overrode this this package parameter called int package param in the actual package itself, and I overrode it with 42 because, Bill, do you know why I did that? Why I picked 42?
Because you might know how old I am.
I did not know you were 42. You young man, you.
That's my
42
guess.
is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. It's the question in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah. So again, nothing wrong at all with the way that this node works inside of SSMS, but you may find yourself wanting to do something different. And don't look at that code. No, don't look. It's top secret. All right, let's minimize that. And so this is Catalog Browser. This particular version you cannot download yet, 0.5.7, because I haven't released it yet. I'm working on it. But you will see, if you do get 0.5.6, you'll see that there's a couple of things in here that, pardon me, that work, that do not work in that. So if we hook into this VM SQL 17 / demo, that's the instance we've been working with. One thing we get is catalog properties. That's another right click and properties you can open. And I actually included some things in here that they don't, but the query that it executes, how did I get the query? I ran Profiler. I'm just not cool enough to do extended events. I've tried to get my head around it. I can't. So I use Profiler. And I snagged that query out of Profiler, and I edited it just a little bit because they bring back this really long XML string, and I'm like, I'm not showing that in a tree. So I just parse what I want out of it. And this is the configuration of this version here, including things like schema build, a couple of properties they bring back that I don't know why, but they don't show them, but things like the SQL Server edition, that comes back. Let's see, there's one in here. I forget which one it is. It may be the SQL Server edition. It'll actually, when you connect to Azure and do ADF v2 IR, SSIS in the cloud, it'll actually say SQL Azure. So I think it's that one, but I'm not sure. But anyway, handy information, nice, again, nice and on the surface. And let's look at that project we looked at just a minute ago. This looks remarkably similar because I built it to look remarkably similar. I actually liked the way they did this up to a point, but you can see here it's already different. So they have just the packages. I've already broken out places for the parameters and the references. So if I look inside of here, there's that one package that we got, no big deal, but I can expand the package here. I can't do that over on the node, which is actually kind of hiding behind us here. I can do a little compare and contrast here like that. And I can, so the package has properties too. There's a version of the package and version comments and a GUID. I say GUID and not GUID because I don't call that thing that swims around with tentacles a squid. And it looks like it rhymes to me. I'm just a simple country boy here, just trying to give this is what's new in this version that you don't have in the version that's out there, these package connections. So they now show up. In fact, you would see package parameters, but the connection parameters would be missing in 0.5.6. It's not a bug as much as it is just not finished. But this one will come out here in a couple of weeks, I promise. But there's the rest of the parameters. And this feature here, I like it or not. I'm debating about whether to give this away or not. But it's in here, at least in this version. It's called Values Everywhere, and I'll probably put it in there. So I could expand this, and here in one spot, I can see even down to the values. I like this a lot because, you know, in order to find this value in the node, I've got to go open another window. Here it is, just right there in front. Bam, it's in my face. I can actually also see that because these package connection references are here. This is that reference we talked about before. Remember when we hook a reference to a project? We can also hook it to a package. In this case, it is hooked to a package, but don't, you know, just go with project in your mind and you're okay. Let Catalog Browser do the discerning for you. But again, there it is. And you can kind of see the inverse of the visualization here. That's intentional. Because now we're looking at it from the reference perspective and we see the connection string, but underneath both is this value, and it's the same value. Again, if you want to see where that value is coming from, you can go all the way down here to environments and you can open up env connection one, and there's that connection string variable, but it doesn't list here where it's being consumed. Here it shows you where it's being consumed. And again, I hope you get the name. Well, I call this in Values Everywhere. It's just, when you need to see it, just expand and it's there. So there's that. These are the project parameters. Note the text decorations. I do the underlines. I just mimicked what they do. And I did that intentionally. If you're used to looking at this inside of the catalog node, you can see it here. And the bold text indicates that it's a literal override. The underline is a reference mapping. If it's no decoration, then it's using the design time default value. So this is one way to surface this. And what does this have to do with DevOps? Well, you can see everything. I mean, on a single surface here. Worst case, you could get this for free and take a screenshot of it. I mean, it beats nothing. And so, you know, and I kind of like this functionality. I do, but I wrote it, so, you know, I'm biased. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? Before I move on, are there any questions, Bill?
I do have a question. I'm going to,
Cool.
So it's from Shri, and Shri says, I have a package which loads multiple files to a temp table. Sometimes the data source format changes, so the package fails. I wanted to keep the package continue to run except one task. Please give some idea.
That's a great question. I think I know the problem you're trying to solve. So if you're looping through and you hit a file and somebody's changed the schema on you, that'll break SSIS data flow. And the reason is the data flow is actually coupled to the schema of the source and destination. So if any of those change, anything changes, I've seen a varchar 60 change to a varchar 61, and it breaks the data flow. So that's actually by design. And Microsoft considered making that design flexible. I was an MVP back then, from 2007 to 2007, rather, to 2012. And I was one of the people they asked, should they do that? And if you really wanted that feature, I owe you an apology. I told them I thought it was a bad idea. I thought it was going to introduce more complexity than it was going to solve. And I stand by that. I still feel that way. So what's happening is, and this happens a lot, and nobody notifies you, they just change things because they think it's one little change. What could it hurt? Or they don't even know it's a change, which is even worse. but you know, because it wakes you up at 3 a.m. when the job fails. So what you can do is there's a property in SSIS that you can set. In fact, I will open up my DILM sample project here and show you. This is a little SSIS project that we're using here. It's not important what it does, but we're not going to do source control, not on this version. I even use source control for my little simple SSIS demos. I'm telling you, there's two types of software developers in the world: those who use source control and those who will. Yeah, you will lose code. It'll break your heart. There's a property on every task in SSIS, and we'll see it here on these packages. If this ever opens, this runs, I don't know why my VMs run slow, but they do whenever I'm presenting. This would be open by now if you weren't watching.
Well, of course.
So it's your fault. No, really, it's my VM's fault. But
I do
here's
have
the property.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, I do have a question here. I thought it was a good time to ask. If the package is encrypted, can the browser still expand internal values if the package was created by another user and or workstation?
So if the package has been deployed to the SSIS catalog, your encryption has changed. So if you recall, there's a package protection level. In fact, if I click on the package here, we can look at the protection level. And by default, it's set to encrypt sensitive with user key. But you can change it to something with a password, encrypt sensitive or encrypt all with a password, or don't save sensitive, either of those. But when you deploy this, it actually changes to a 6th level that is no longer available in this list. If you were running this in package deployment mode, this is in project deployment mode, go Google that. We don't have time to cover it. If you're running it in there, that 6th one would show up, and it's called server storage. And whenever you deploy an SSIS package to the SSIS catalog, it rips out your protection level and your password, and it puts it into server storage. And that's good and bad. If somebody has the rights to export that package, when they export it, it does not put it back on. So they can look at your work. If you're trying to hide something and deploy it to the catalog, you know, if you've got some proprietary code or something that you're doing using some magic formulas, say in a script task or a script component, you're going to want the first book that I came out with last year. I had 3 books come out last year. And the first one came out in July. It's called Building Custom Tasks in SSIS. And it talks about all the things you have to do in order to build a custom task. It doesn't actually tell you how to build one, although we build one as a demo, but it's a non-production ready. There's no validation, none of that. It's all the stuff around building a custom task. But you want a custom task because you can compile that into a DLL. You can obfuscate it. There's a lot of stuff that you can do to your code once it's compiled into .NET that you cannot protect all your code here in SSIS, especially with the SSIS catalogs. With its behavior, as I just described. When you deploy it, it sets it to server storage. If you've encrypted the entire package with a password, if you've set that, and when somebody looks at the DTSX file in source control or on a drive, all they see is an encryption, just, you know, a bajillion mile long encryption string. If you deploy it, it decrypts it and stores it in the catalog. Now, the catalog has encryption. Don't get me wrong. It's not decrypted in there. In fact, if you have no encryption here and you deploy it, it encrypts it in the catalog. But it encrypts it with the transparent data encryption set in SSIS DB. And again, if somebody is an SSIS admin and they can export that project to an ISPAC file, the ISPAC file is just a zip file. So if you open it with 7-zip or you rename the file zip, you can open it in Windows Explorer, and there's your package, decrypted. So a couple of gotchas there, right? You've got to, that person's got to have admin rights first, and they've got to know how to export the package. That's not too hard to figure out. And they've got to know that you can open that ISPAC file and view it. It's just an encrypted deal. So just be aware of that. But if you have functionality that you consider proprietary, go get the book. Go get the building custom tasks, or not mine. There's other books on SSIS that talk about building custom tasks. Do that. I wrote mine assuming you know nothing about .NET and software development. So that's why I like mine. Encrypt sensitive with user key is that package protection level. So let's look at another property. Let's answer that first question. There's a property here, a couple of them. There's maximum error count. And if you set this to 0, that's effectively saying this task always succeeds. So if you've got a data flow that's failing because every now and then one of your packages fails, then this is one way to do it. There's some advantages and disadvantages to doing it this way. Will your package continue running in a fault-tolerant manner even if it hits, package 10 out of 100, or say file 10 out of 100 is changed? Will it continue to load the ones it can? It will. It'll fail on that one, and it'll record the error in the catalog, even if you've got this set. But it will continue executing. And there's some more to this. And I've got an article series out at SQL Server Central. If you go to SQLServerCentral.com and join, it's free. They send a great email once every weekday in the U.S. Actually, it's every weekday everywhere, so not just the U.S. But Steve Jones, the editor out there, writes a good editorial, I think. I try to read them every day. If you look down the left side of that page, in fact, I'll show it to you here in the deck. There's a link called Stairways. If you click on Stairways, there's a Stairway to Integration Services. I wrote that a few years ago. There's I think 3 steps in there, 2 or 3 articles on fault tolerance in SSIS and advanced event behavior. You want to read about that because there's more to this than just setting this to 0, but this is one of the steps that you would do. So just so you know. I'm going to change that back to 1 because it makes me nervous when it's set to 0. But that's the answer to your question. All right, let's talk some more about DevOps. So we've got this SSIS package is configured and it's ready to run, and we want to run it. Well, I mentioned earlier this idea of having a framework, and that's one of the things I wanted to show you here on DILM Suite. Is there's Catalog Browser, and this is the Framework Community Edition. If you go to that link, you can get it. This is Framework Browser, and what the framework is just a schema that I've added to SSIS DB, and 3 tables, and the schema is named Custom. The tables are application packages, applications, and packages, and really, really tough to see how these are related. In fact, if you go get the project, you get the source, the SQL to build all of this, even a test project. There's one package called parent that executes every time. And basically what happens here when we run this, if I do a new query based off of this, I can run the, I can show you what's in those tables. Let's make this a little bit bigger so I don't have to zoom in. And I can select star from custom.applications. There we go. And I've only got one application in there. It's called Framework Test. Well, I have to zoom anyway because I didn't make my grid big enough. Then we can do, we can look at the other 2 tables, in fact. So there's packages, and then there's application packages. And if we look at these together, what we'll see is kind of what we expect. This is third normal form. So this is all the information I need to find a package in the SSIS catalog. I need its folder name. I already know the catalog's named SSIS DB. I need its folder name, its project name, and its package name. And then this application packages down here is setting up my fault tolerance. And it says, and it's actually setting up my execution order too. It says run package ID 1 and application ID 1. Run that one first. Run package ID 3 second. Run package ID 2 third. Now, why do I do these as 10, 20, 30? Because it's a lot easier to write 25 than it is to write that update statement and then the insert. Fail application on package failure kind of works using that maximum error count property I showed you a minute ago. That's in there in the parent package, and you can see it. It's all there. It's open source. You can download it and deploy it. There's even a doc that walks you through how to deploy it. It needs updating. I apologize for that. There's a couple of scripts that come with the project that I don't mention in the documentation, and they're also not part of the project. I've been busy. I'm sorry. I'll get to it. I promise. But if you have questions about it, you can email me. My email address is andy.leonard at dilmsuite.com. So that's a good email address to get me with. So what these do, these packages, is this allows me to execute a single stored procedure called custom execute catalog parent package, and I can pass it a single parameter, and that parameter is application name, and I'm just going to copy and paste this framework test here. And if I execute that, it takes off running, and it's going to run those 3 packages in that order. If I had 300 packages configured to run as part of framework test, it would run all 300 in that order. And the last thing I wanted to show you as part of the DILM suite is the catalog reports solution. And as I mentioned, this one lives outside of the, this lives in reporting services. By the way, one of those, child 2 is hard-coded to fail. You can see every time you see child 2, you will see that it fails. It's got a script task, it returns script results that failure. That'll fail every time. But if we look at this, we can see it running. What I like about this is, as opposed to creating a package with a bunch of execute package tasks in it, is if you look at that in the catalog, what you see is one package running, the package with the execute package task. You have to drill into either the overview or messages to see the individual packages running. This actually creates a row per package. It does it here and in the catalog reports built into SSMS. So I like that. It just seems a little more representative of what's happening in the enterprise when that happens. It looks like we started running child 3 now. And just like before, I can drill into the overview. I can look at messages here and see what's going on in child 3 at this point. It's just SSRS. It's just queries against the database. It's, you know, it's not magic. Again, running slowly here. Not sure why, but yeah, there's my messages. Looks like I got a warning. Oh, I'm running a 2012 script task. I shouldn't be doing that, but it'll run. Notice it didn't say it's not running. It will run it. It'll run backwards compatible. What it won't do is run forwards compatible. So that'll throw an error. I blogged about that not long ago. Anyway, we look at the overview for this as well, and it should show me child 3's overview. And since I've run it a couple of times, we can see performance. These are my 4 favorite reports built in, and I just tried to mimic them as well as I could inside of SSRS. So I ran Profiler, I ran the queries, ran the reports. I grabbed the code out of there. I stuck it in text in the reporting services solution. Again, it's available at GitHub. You can get to the GitHub through dilmsuite.com, clicking on reports. One last thing is, so you build all this framework stuff. How do you see what's, is there a way to visualize what's there? Well, that's what framework browser's for. I've only got the one application in this instance, but there's the application properties. That restartable is actually a feature of not this, of an unfree version of this, but it shows up in this list. And these are, package property. You note they're listed in order, 1, 3, and 2. That's the order they run in, their execution order. There's their execution order properties. It's a very basic tree view that just kind of shows you how this works. It's like catalog browser. It's a visualization of what's going on in here for this. What I like about frameworks is I can execute a single command and I can call a bunch of different packages. I can do something that the execute package task will not do. I can say start this package in project 1 and start this package in project 2, which is they won't do that natively inside of with the functionality you have. If you're using project reference or project deployment method, which you have to use the catalog, you cannot reach a package in another SSIS project, but with the framework you can. So that allows you to build small functional SSIS projects, which is a great idea. And you can deploy them once. You can do code reuse. You can build a lot of SSIS packages with that aren't what I call a monolith. You ever open an SSIS package and there's 20 data flows in there? That can be tedious to troubleshoot. And if you change one because somebody changed your source schema, You should be testing all of them. That's software, best practices. So what if you just made a package? What if you made 20 packages, each with one data flow in it? Well, it's great. You'd isolate it for troubleshooting and maintenance, but now you got to come up with a mechanism to run 20 packages in order. Frameworks. There's your answer. So this is why I built the stuff that I built. I'm trying to solve some of these problems that I ran into as a consultant, and for a while I managed 40 ETL developers at Unisys. So anyway, that's it. Be happy to answer any questions as we get through these last bit of slides here. I'll answer your questions, but I'm gonna go to the thank you page, and I appreciate y'all's time. I really do. I hope this was valuable to you. If you're listening on the recording, thanks for taking your time to listen to the recording. That's how you can reach me, and I'd be happy to help in any way that I can. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions here. First one is, do we need XP command shell enabled to be able to run package with a stored procedure?
No, because the SSIS catalog is using the functionalities there, but the functionality is in SQL CLR. So it does run things into command line, but it doesn't expose that part of the surface area, XP command shell. It exposes a different part, but you gotta have that ability to be able to do it. There's other ways to schedule SSIS packages. You can run them from the command line if you like, using Windows Windows Scheduler or any scheduling software if you'd like. You still have that ability even in the catalog. Okay.
The next question comes from Adrian. He asks, what mechanism are you using to deploy an ISPack file, and how do you bind the project parameters to the environment variables during deployment?
Okay, great questions. The answer to how do I deploy it, I can, in production, most often I'm running, I'm a developer, I'm a consultant. Most of the times when I'm in production, I'm handing off an ISPack file to a production DBA, and they're doing the deployment of that. So what does that look like? Well, let's go look at the project we just opened, the DILM sample. Whenever you save and whenever Visual Studio executes a build, I do that in quotes because it's different from, say, like a C# project build. It'll create this bin folder if it doesn't exist. It'll create development if that's what you've got Visual Studio. That's a default setting for Visual Studio. I'm trying to remember the right word for it. I want to say environments, but I don't know if that's the right word. But usually you have two choices, debug and release. Configuration, I think is what they call it in Visual Studio. But there is the ISPack file. And I told you a minute ago, kind of mentioning that you can open this with 7-zip and see the packages. There it is. It's in there. And if this package has been deployed and then exported, and I would export it as the ISPack file, I could do what I just did, and it would be decrypted if it was encrypted when it went in. But there's a couple of things you cannot see in here. There's a project manifest, add project manifest. There's content types.xml. Those are generated as part of the deployment process, and the integration services deployment wizard know how to handle that. Project params is actually an artifact inside of an SSIS project deployment model project. And then there's our package. And that's all that it needs to do that. So most of the time I'm doing this, or I'm right-clicking in Visual Studio when I'm doing test deployments. Right-click and deploy, and it'll fire up the same integration services deployment wizard. In fact, it looks like this. That's just how it starts. And it does this whether you're inside Visual Studio or outside. It runs the exact same code for deployment. The other question was binding parameters. And once the parameters are created as part of so here's the package parameters. They are bound and scoped. So this one is scoped at that one package. Here's the project params. And again, this is at the project level. I could share this across these values across multiple packages in the project. Package parameters are scoped down to the package level. So I hope that's the answer to your question. If not, I'm sorry. Email me. I'll be happy to do better.
We got a few more questions, but we're low on time, so I'm going to do eeny, meeny, miny, mo here. Uh, when you call...
Y'all email them to me. I'll answer your question. Email it to me.
Okay. Well, I'll do this one, if it's all right with you. When you call an SSIS package inside a job which is owned by a SQL Server agent account, and one of the tasks is running command line, which account was used to run the command line?
The account that started SQL agent.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Everything runs in that context, unless you do a run as.
Right.
Because you can do that as a command line too.
Okay, so Mr. Leonard, if you could help me out here, we have 35 attendees still left here, and if you could
Wow.
it got up to 50.
My goodness.
So
okay, I can't see them, Bill, so I don't know.
maybe pick.
I'll tell you what. I'll give you a number.
Okay.
Let's go with the number 17. Good prime number. You count down 17, and that person wins.
6, 7, 8, 9.
I should have made it 38 or something. Now, as I hear you counting, I could have made it harder.
M. Khan. I'm not sure what your first name is, Mr. Khan, but just don't take your wrath out on me. See,
Star Trek reference.
Andy got that one. So, Mr. Khan, if you could email me at devops@pass.org, I will get you your information for a $100 gift card, courtesy of Redgate. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Redgate, for sponsoring.
Yes, yes. So thank you very much, Mr. Leonard. Thank you guys all for attending. As far as our March speaker goes, I'm not sure that I have it set up yet, so we will soon. All right. Thank you guys all very much. Thank you, Andy.